Good morning. Welcome to the Digital Transformation Room. I'm Sam Perrell, your moderator, and welcome to SEO, or 404 SEO Friend or Foe. I'm happy to introduce Fili. Fili's a technical SEO consultant, an ex-Google engineer, a frequent conference speaker, and was a senior technical lead in the Google Search Quality team. At Search Brothers, he offers SEO consulting, SEO audits, SEO training, and successfully recovers websites from Google penalties. Give it up for Fili.
Thank you. So I'm here today to talk about 404s. And yes, this may sound like a boring topic, but it really isn't. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have like websites with the e-commerce shop or something like that, or working on that? Any chance? Yeah, at least some? Because this will also most definitely be interesting to you. If not, don't worry. We'll still talk about the impact of 404s on your backlinks, as well as on your crawl budget, as well as on your user signals, which altogether also impacts your visibility in search, both Google, but also other search engines like Bing, Yandex, and other ones. And of course, we will answer the question, is it a friend or a foe? Yeah. So first, let's talk about it. Just very quickly, the basic for the ones that don't know. When we're talking about HTTP status codes, we have a user sending a request to a browser, to a server for a page. The page then responds. Within that response is a body and headers, HTTP headers and HTTP response. And within the headers, we find a status code. Now, the status code basically tells us what the status is of that document, the response that we're getting. Now, there's a couple of ones that are relevant for SEO, not all of them. I will say straight away, there are about 95 of them, not all officially supported. But there are a few that are most definitely relevant for SEO. First one you may have known or know of, that's the 200 OK status code. This is the most common status code across the web. Most documents respond with the 200 status code. Not rightfully so always, we'll talk about that part, but they do respond a lot of pages. Another one is in the 3XX series. We often refer those to the redirect. We'll talk about a few of those today as well. And the most common ones from an SEO perspective are the 301, 302, 307, 308. Now, there are also other status codes in the 300 series, like 300, 305, 306, and 303, that are actually not necessarily redirecting, but have another function, basically. And we won't talk about those. They're not that relevant for SEO purposes right now today. Now, of course, in the 400 series, the 4XX series, we have the 404, our main topic of today, as well as the 410, which is similar to the 404. Then last out of the 4XX series that is of real relevance to us as SEOs is the 429, because this one slows down how fast search engines crawl our website. So this one is actually a quite important one, because if we return this one, then crawlers crawl our website less. This is a way for us to control that. Now, some people use the other status code in the 400 series, like 401, 403, 407, 405, etc., 406, to slow down crawling, but they don't work that way. So that's important to note. This is the one that works for that. The other ones do not. Then, of course, we have the 500 series code, the 5XX. That's basically, in general, server error, content not available, come back later. In a nutshell, that's the basic message. Now, there are several in there that Google listens explicitly for, like the 503, the 500. But in a sense, it all comes down to the same message to search engines. Come back later. Now, if we send this over an extended period of time, then this is going to have some impact on how we rank as well. And also where we return this. Like if we return this on our robots.txt, that will be a problem for an extended period of time. Now, we're not going to talk much about the 500 errors at all today. Just want to let you know. By the way, there is another one that, for example, LinkedIn is using, which is a non-official status code, which is 999, which is also an interesting one. They say it's named after the German 999, no. And they basically use that instead of the 429. So, but because it's an unofficial an invalid status code because it falls outside the other 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500 ranges, it's actually considered completely invalid and falls therefore under the 500 series. So it's interpreted as a 500 one. So just a fun side note. Now, if you want to know more about status codes, you can check out all the meanings of all the different status codes that are out there, official, unofficial, on this particular website. Today, our focus, however, is on the 404. And during our conversation today, we will put the two, the 410 and the 404, together as one, because most search engines basically treat those as equal, yeah, to a large extent. And there's really no necessary benefit over the 410 for the instead of 404. You can use either one of the two, it's fine. Some people really are strict and want to go 410, that's perfectly fine, that's not a problem. But for Google and for other search engines, they're generally considered the same. Yeah, so for the discussion today, we're going to treat them the same going forward. And so let's talk about what impact it can have on SEO. Now, first, let's take a simple example, robots.txt files. Now, I'm assuming you guys all have a robots.txt file on your web server, right? You have something like this, a simple file. Now, if you read this correctly, you see a simple file which disallows every bot access to your website with the exception of Googlebot. Top line says disallow all for all user agents, except there's a Googlebot one that says go for it. This we place, of course, on the root of our main domain, and we think we're done, right? Now, if we don't place that document there, if we return a 400 status code there, any status code except for the 429, Google is going to see this as an allowance to crawl the entire website. So there's no blockage on any pattern. Yeah, return a 404 status code here, even if you actually have a valid robots.txt file on that location, but your status code is 404 or 401 or any of the other ones, except for 429, it will literally mean crawl everything. It will ignore any content there. Also, if you use the other status codes like 401 and 403, which some people use to basically tell search engines like, hey, crawl us less, or this particular subdomain is off limits to you. So they put a 401 and a 403 on the subdomain's robots.txt file path to basically say, forbidden, don't go here. This is not for indexation. You're actually doing the opposite. Because again, it falls in the 400 range, it's not a 429. So as a result, it's considered a 404. And as a result, the entire subdomain can be crawled in this scenario. Yeah? Now, where would this happen? For example, your staging server or your CDN subdomain, where you serve your static assets from, if that's coming out of AWS S3 bucket, for example. Yeah, this can happen there. So because the path doesn't exist, so it's a forbidden. Yeah, so this actually happens more often than people think. And CDNs is one of those things that you do need to keep an eye on as well. So if you use cloud services, be it Cloudflare, be it Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud, Azure Cloud, doesn't matter. Keep an eye on what responses you have there, especially on those robots.txt files requests, yeah, for subdomains, etc. Something that most people don't think about. Now, instead, we can also return a 200 status code, but what we return is not a plain text file, but HTML. And that would also mean, okay, everything is allowed. So this would be considered invalid. It's not a valid robots.txt file. So there is no robots.txt file. So as a result, the entire website, again, is crawlable. Now, there are exceptions to this that you can implement. Here's a fun one. So this is actually robots.txt file rendered on the side there. And this is the code behind it. Now, what you may notice in the far top, the first character is a pound sign. The whole HTML code here is behind a comment. So this is actually totally valid as a robots.txt file. Yeah. So you can still render a robots.txt file as HTML if you like, just do it like this as a comment. So it's a little bit tricky, but it is quite doable. It can be fun. But of course, we need the actual robots.txt file. Now, this all is very relevant because of our subdomains. I would really highly recommend that you check your subdomains, especially which ones search engines are crawling, and check in Google Search Console, Bing Webmaster Tools, and any other search engine tools you might be interested in. Check them. By the way, the first two I mentioned, Bing and Google, their tools are for free. So if you haven't signed up with them, especially also Bing, because I know in the industry we're also focused on Google, but you also get a lot of free data from Bing. So just go for that as well. Like, why not? Yeah, it literally does not cost anything. And they will tell you also within their Site Explorer part which subdomains they know about, where they have index pages. Now also check your server logs. Manage all those robots.txt files on the different subdomains, because I see a lot of subdomains missing robots.txt files and responding with the wrong status codes in this scenario. Yeah. If you redirect, by the way, which is a possible solution as well, some sites say, okay, we'll redirect the robots.txt path on the subdomain to the main domain. So we apply the 300 series. That is also a viable solution. However, be mindful of the path structure, because the structure that you use on the subdomain is often not the same that you use on the main domain. So the rules that you apply on the main domain may not apply to the subdomain, and you basically still allow everything to be crawled. Yeah? It's better to manage this and really put a robots.txt file on every single subdomain that's publicly accessible. And keep in mind, this includes HTTP versus HTTPS. So if you have both accessible, then you need to place it on both or redirect to one of the two versions. Yeah, it applies to both. So let's also talk about how it can go wrong with 404s. First, it's important to note that, and this is not new, but he said it nicely, so I'm quoting him now. This is absolutely not new. And I'm not talking about 2019. This is since the beginning of the web. Yeah, the whole idea was there's one document, and the document has one URL, and you link to that URL. Yeah, the linking was the invention of the World Wide Web. That's where we already came with one piece of content. The URL is the identifier for that piece of content. Now, you heard Martha earlier talk about identifiers that you, when you reference other, if you were in the previous sessions where you reference others' content within the structured data, often you can use the URL as the identifier there too. Yeah? URLs are really identifiers of a piece of content. Now, to put it in another way, think of it as, if you're familiar with relational databases, think of it as the row ID of an entry within a table. It's the one thing you do not change. Everything else in the row you can change, but the ID of that you don't. And if you need to pull that data or reference to that row, you reference to the ID. Yeah, similar story. And this is important because URLs are actually immutable. We don't think of URLs as immutable, but they actually are, because the only two things that we can do is either create them or delete them. The 301, so to say, is not actually a status that's in this regard. It's a redirect. It's basically saying it doesn't exist anymore, it has moved. But that's not an edit, because it's not the same URL anymore. Yeah, the URL itself can only be created or deleted, which either translate in the 200 status code, or the 404 status code, or the 410. As I mentioned, I see those two as equal for the sake of the discussion today. Now, Google does like to crawl 404s, and it will do so, even 404s that it knows existed before. So old URLs that they know are 404, they'll recrawl again and again and again. And you will see that pop up within your log files, within your crawl stats, etc. You will see this happening there. And there's a reason for this. It's basically a sanity check for them. They want to make sure that your server is correctly configured and sending back the right signals. Yeah, because that helps them further evaluate, can we trust the content on their server? Yeah. Of course, this doesn't always happen, which is why we end up with soft 404s. And soft 404s you may have seen within Google Search Console in a report like this, where you basically see SOF 404s being part of your website. Now, the numbers that you see here are generally relatively conservative. This is a sample. There's always more to find than what you see here. Yeah, often they're either in other buckets or they're not even shown in Search Console, but they're there. And Google has probably seen them as well. Now, this is just a sample set. Simple example of a SOF 404 is where we have a page of a path that does not exist, that does not basically render to actual usable content, but returns with a 200 status code. Yeah, the status code that you see here, 200. That is wrong. That should be a 404. That is considered a SOF 404. And search engines have to figure out, is this actual content or is this a SOF 404? Here's another one. That's now we get a little bit more trickier. Here we have an example of a shop where we have a product page that doesn't exist anymore and is now redirecting, because the website owner decided to redirect it for various reasons, capture leads, backlinks, or whatever, trying to basically still capture these things and redirects it to the homepage or the category page of the shop. By doing so, they're creating a SOF 404 because the content of the new landing page compared to the content that used to be there is completely different. And in the eyes of search engines, that's not the same content. So the old content, which they're trying to access, is gone. So it's a SOF 404. Yeah. This can also be done with canalization. Yeah, so, like, fun fact, canalization is actually a soft 301. So again, just as the other one is SOF 404, this is basically a soft 301 and thereby becomes a SOF 404 because this is basically redirecting to the homepage, which again is not the same content. And we sometimes make this mistake, especially since the pagination stuff has been dropped by Google. You can see this more often also with pagination of old pagination URLs that don't exist anymore. Yeah? So websites still make these errors, and through canalization or redirects, and you should really avoid that. When we do have a 404 page, we need to make sure it's actually allowed to be crawled, because if it isn't, then search engines will also not see that 404. Just a quick tip on the side. Other pages that may be considered a SOF 404, empty pages, where we have literally just the boilerplate of the website, be it the header, the footer, the sidebar, and the main content section is empty. There's nothing there. Or what is there says there's no results, there's no products, there's no search results, there's all out of stock. Any type of message like that. That's basically communicating there is no content. And this also goes to a step further, because this happens frequently with no result pages. Google actually looks for negative language. So also things like no reviews and item sold and this item is not for sale, that kind of stuff, or out of stock, can result in similar diagnosis on the Google site of like, oh, this must be a SOF 404 page. I'm not saying that they're correct. I also not say that it always happens, but they can if we don't use the right language. So we have to be mindful there. So why do we care? Well, in a nutshell, it impacts our crawl behavior, or the crawl behavior of the search bot on our website. If they see a lot of SOF 404s, they basically don't crawl us as much. Even Bing says, okay, yeah, if you do this, these 404 pages that are actually should be 404, but are not 404 because they're SOF 404, may end up as landing pages. Which again, also in search engines as Google, may impact our user signals, because users do not get what they're looking for. Even with those redirects, for example, when a user comes from an external website, they follow the link to a product page that doesn't exist anymore and they end up on the homepage. It's not what they were looking for. Yeah, so the user signals in general tend to also have a negative effect here. The overall content quality signals. So we already told Google with SOF 404s that they can't trust our server signals, and therefore they will also not trust our content signals. Now, I know this sounds pretty basic, but the key thing is you can do so much on optimization in schema and other things across the website. But if Google already doesn't trust your server signals and already doesn't trust your content signals, you're screwed. Yeah, this is basic stuff. I know this is foundational stuff in a way. Yeah, but if that's wrong, the rest won't work. So whatever else you do, yes.
How do you assess what's too much? As an example, your software report is up this much.
Yeah.
Your 404 report, like where do you go? Okay, that's too much.
So I would actually say most of it. The moment you see it in Google Search Console, I would be wary. I would most definitely look at what's going on there, what type of pages are being flagged. And this can be a variation. Again, it's just a sample most of the time, so it's not 100% representative. I would look, I would do an audit, I would check what's going on and try to prevent that from happening again. I'm going to talk about a couple of solutions in a couple of slides. I have a couple of case studies on how we solved a number of these issues and what the effect was of that. Yeah, so I hope that will answer the question. But in a nutshell, any software for popping up in your Google Search Console, I would be wary about. Because if you look at all the major updates that have happened in the last decade plus, and yes, you can go further back than Panda for this, yeah, have been content quality related. Pretty much almost all the major updates. Yeah, so content signals and content quality signals are very important. Even other search engines basically say the same. Yeah, this can impact your indexing of your website. Yeah, other search engines, same story. Now, I know we all might not be interested in Yandex as much in ranking there, but it just shows you it's a common problem. It doesn't apply just to Google. And it also impacts our render budget. So rendering these 200 pages is much more costly than rendering a 400 page because 404 doesn't get actually fully rendered. Now they stop at the 404 part, the status code. And that's important to know because Google has limited resources to crawl your website. Yes, your website might not be that big, and yes, Google can potentially crawl your website entirely, but your content signals need to be there for Google to actually want to crawl your website. And if your content signals are suffering, then you will also suffer in how many of your pages will actually be crawled. And in the end, it all comes down to the input-output scenario where the user signals and our technical SEO signals are on the input side. Partially, we control that. The technical SEO part, we do control to a large extent. User signals we can influence, most definitely. The algorithms are the black box in this case. Yeah, we don't have a view on what's happening in there, and it will change. The output will also change accordingly. If we want to change the output, which are the SERPs, the rankings, how we perform, etc. If we want to change that, we need to change the input. As simple as that. And that's our responsibility in a nutshell. So this really can impact our rankings. And if we're not careful, we also get into this loop where, worse user signals, lower rankings, everything just gets into a loop and gets worse and worse and worse. So we do need to tackle this. Now, I don't know if you're into gardening, but you do need to get out the weed. And software force really need to be seen as the weed of the website. Yeah, we need to get rid of that. So just a couple of quick case studies. First one, here we have a crawl budget. It's pretty stable, pretty healthy crawl budget initially. It looks like we're having millions of pages being crawled on a daily basis. Fluctuates, of course, but we also have a lot of software force. Now, the number of crawled URLs per day is nothing, it's like significantly higher compared to the number of software force. But again, this is a sample. And the trend here is stable, just as the other previous slide. Yeah, the trend of crawl is relatively stable. The trend of software force is relatively stable. So we already know a little bit. Okay, Google doesn't really see a lot of reasons to crawl more. Yeah. Looking at the websites, and I've seen it on a number of websites, it was often out of stock, sold out type of messaging, or messages like these. Yeah, no results, out of stock, not for sale, no products found, etc. And this can be e-commerce sites, but this can also be other websites. And especially the no results is something to keep in mind, because even Google says there, okay, you should either block them or use robots.txt or no index those. I prefer to use 404 in this regard, because that will ignore it as well. Yeah. And otherwise block them if you can. If you get, this is to prevent infinite spaces as well of pages that are no results. Negative language is also something that comes up in these cases. So we had this situation a few times where a lot of the website was templated, and from a design point of view, etc., there was some content. The content wasn't as much. Of course, it was amplified with structured data, so Google did know what the content was at times. However, there was very little content, and a lot of the pages looked pretty much the same. And on the middle of each page, there was a nice block that said, no reviews available, because the product that was there wasn't reviewed yet. Now, the product was available, just the reviews weren't available. Yeah. And also Google saw those as software force because of the negative language, because most of the rest of the page was templated across, and there was so little variation of those pages across all those products. Google pretty much saw those as the similar type of pages, and the main content being the reviews, which were not available. So it must be a software for. Yes. 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 Yeah, so these pages, to answer your question, yes, so these pages return the 200 status code, and they were rendering like normal. And these were actually pages people could interact on. So these were actually content pages. But because there was so little variation between the number of pages, and we're talking a few thousand at minimum, but then you have this no review thing in the middle, promptly also available, that says no reviews available, it became a negative language problem. And yeah, we needed to fix that. And I'll tell you in a moment how we did that. In the words of Google, when you have these software force where you do return 200 status codes, and again, the no review availables is not necessarily software for, but it was interpreted as such. So we need to be mindful there. So whenever, answering your earlier question, whenever I see the software for popping up in Search Console, I'm checking out why. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe it's just a few pages. I might ignore it if it doesn't grow further than that. But I will check every single one of those. I want to know what's going on. In the words of Google, you're not putting anything in, and you just waste a crawl budget. It comes back to what I said earlier with the render budget as well. Those are two different things, but you're basically wasting both of them with software force. And Google will keep crawling those URLs. So as a consequence, because the same URLs that Google sees, they want to keep crawling these because they're wondering, will the content change? You're returning a 200 status code, so it must be something coming, right? So they keep crawling the same URLs, and they see the same type of content, and they're like, okay, this is software for, we're not really getting anything from this website that looks to be new. As a result, we end up with low discovery stats. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this is from Google Search Console, and the refresh is old URLs being recrawled, while the discovery being new URLs that Google knows about that they haven't crawled before. Only 2% of the crawl budget is going to that in the last 90 days. That's not much. If you have, for example, a shop and you're trying to get a page index for and ranked, for example, for Black Friday, you think that's a little bit time sensitive, right? Now, if you're in this situation, your page might not be crawled until January or later. Do you think that's an issue? Yeah, so that's the thing. This is something, especially with some more time-sensitive content or just plain business logic. Like if you have a major business announcement to make, you'd rather have the announcement ripple through on a certain time frame that you choose, not when they choose. Yeah, not 6 months later. Hey, suddenly you rank for, oh yeah, we have launched this product. Yeah, you want that 6 months earlier when you actually launch the product. So this is one of those things. You need to be aware of what's happening because of this, a limited number of new URLs gets crawled. So that's something to be mindful of. Another aspect of this as well is that the SEO signals, if you apply changes to your website, these are not being picked up in critical mass. So it takes longer for the algorithms to take these into consideration and adjust your overall rankings. So say that you're making change to your website to say like, hey, we want to tackle, we improve the website, except solving this software 4 issue, obviously. But we changed the canonization, or we changed the page titles and stuff like that. We do some of the basic SEO, change the internal linking. It's going to take quite some time for this to be reflected before a critical mass has been recrawled, as well as of the new URLs that are being crawled, for that to be reflective within Google algorithms. And as updates happen, you might be already in the next update before that is, or the one after that, before your site has been crawled at a critical mass. So it really can take some time for changes to have an impact. And now, you may also be familiar with this particular graph, discovered currently not indexed. This is basically your queue from the URL scheduler. The URL scheduler is a algorithm within Google that prioritizes which URLs to crawl next. And again, sample. Yeah, this is not all of them, but this is a representative sample. And if you see this growing or stagnating or pretty much being like at a level that it doesn't really decrease, you have a problem. Now, the problem may be software force, could also be something else. Say that straight away as well. Maybe you're not blocking the right file in robust.txt. Maybe you have a lot of tracking URLs or user-generated URLs that are being generated that you actually that Google shouldn't be finding and queuing for crawling. So there can be many other reasons as well why there are URLs in this particular queue. But the thing is, this queue will not necessarily get smaller if you have a lot of software force. Google will likely not try to crawl you more. And this might actually grow. And we've seen this in a number of cases. This is actually one of them. So in those cases, we normally we work with the website owner and we change it to a 404 for the primary reason, as also again, in the words of Google, they don't waste crawl budget, because the moment that Google sees the HTTP status code, they ignore the rest. They ignore the body. Meaning also you can do whatever you want with the body. That's a nice part. Yeah, you can have other stuff there too. The other thing that we do is we change the language. So things like, we are also mindful for that. We look on the website and we actually, during our orders, also check for the language. We change it to positive language. So instead of no reviews available, add your review. Yeah, make it a positive, proactive thing. Be mindful of the type of language that you have there on those websites. Doing this, we saw often double to triple increases in crawl requests, with also corresponding 404 reporting within Search Console, which is perfectly fine. We were expecting this. We're hoping for this. Yeah, this is a good sign for us. And we see the software force drop generally. Yeah, and that's a good behavior. That's exactly what we want to see. We also see our overall content quality being perceived as improved because Google starts crawling us more on the new URLs, the ones that we actually also want to have indexed. And as a result, we see that other queue going down. Yeah, Google's getting to it. Now, it may still take a while, and this actually went further, but it does improve over time. And we also see, and that's the other one, the crawled currently not indexed is like a bucket for anything that hasn't been categorized yet within Google Search Console reports. And you'll see that often also go down. These are all signs that Google basically sees more value in the content that you're serving. Yeah, that is trusting your content quality more. And we see newer content being updated and getting crawled, as newer SEO signals being picked up. And as a result, we see more pages being indexed within Google Search Console. So all positive effects. And that's what we then also see in impressions, because now we're also managing user expectations. Users actually get to the pages where we actually have content to serve. Yeah, and in all, positive effect on the crawl budget part from that perspective. Now, just to debunk a couple of quick myths, or one major myth, I also see a lot of this happening with 404s and backlinks, where people have backlinks, the content has been deleted, so they redirect it to different content in hope to maintain the backlink. Yeah, say that you have a website, an article that has been featured in, say, some of the major news publications, and the article is now off because you had a reorganization, the website has been restructured, content has been deleted, this article has been deleted, but hey, you know what? We have so many good backlinks to that. Let's redirect it to the homepage. Sounds familiar? Yeah. Problem is that Google algorithms tend to be smart enough to actually see this, neutralize the effect, and where you think you're saving your page rank, you're not. This is generally a myth. On top of that, you're disappointing the traffic, because anyone who clicked on those particular links on those articles at those newspapers was expecting something else on your homepage. So this is not a good user experience either, not from a search perspective, just from a user perspective in general. So how do we solve this? It's not that hard. First of all, make sure to check your backlinks. If you really care about the backlinks to your website, then update them. Yeah, if you care about this part, that's fine, absolutely fine, but you need to actually then update them. See if you have an alternative that you can offer these newspapers to link to. If not, then the 404 is the best solution. But we can add to this because, like I said earlier, Google doesn't care about the body of the HTTP response in this case. So we can add a smart 404. We can see what is the URL structure that they were trying to access. We know that URL structure and what type of content was served on there because it was our page. So now we can also say these are the alternatives. We can still capture that lead if it is type-in traffic or click-through traffic. Yeah, but the page itself can't rank. And by the 301 redirect, we already is telling search engines that we don't want to rank for it. Yet we still want to have that page rank. That's what we're telling search engines. They're not going for that. If you really want to rank for that content, you need to have that content. As simple as that. Yeah, this is something that baffles me sometimes, but it's pretty basic. If you want to rank for certain content, you need to have the content. It's a balance between those two. If you don't, then you don't. You can't rank for it. Yeah, you need to find out which one of the two is more important. But that's a business decision. That's not my decision. Yeah, but 404 is the solution if you do not have the content in that scenario. Last quick example. So we have this e-commerce shop ranking and showing within Google Search Console, in Google Search Results, and there are quite a few pages that when people click on it, they're basically out of stock. The experience is you walk through, like in a supermarket, you walk in and all the shelves are empty. That's totally useless. So, of course, people bounce, go back to Google Search Results, click on the competitor, which negatively impacts your search user signals. So, as a result, we can see over time your impressions may go down because you're just not that relevant. Your competitors are more relevant because they're not an empty store, you are. Yeah. So, what do we do about this? So, assuming that you do have a healthy crawl budget, talking about the first case that I was mentioning, there's a couple of things that you can look at. And the first one is short term. When we're thinking short term, we're thinking a couple of weeks, days, weeks scenario. In that case, you can still use schema and stuff like that saying out of stock. Yeah? Because you tell Google, okay, come back again, 200 status code, it's fine. You assume it will be back soon. Medium term, we go a little bit further. Now we're talking months. We know the product is coming back. We just don't know when. Yeah, we don't anticipate it to be in the next few weeks, but we do anticipate it will be back. Now at this point, no index becomes our best tool. We still want Google to recrawl it, not to forget it, to basically check it once in a while. We can manage how often Google crawls that using our internal linking and update that accordingly. And get Google to recrawl it the moment the product is back by linking it from, for example, a prominent page on the website and say, hey, it's back. Yeah, but in this case, that's the best way to go about it. And what we do see is, of course, we implement here alternatives as well on like, hey, if this product isn't available, maybe interest in that one, or notify me if when this product comes back, basically. Yeah, so you can still capture the lead. These are solutions you can use. Long term, on the other hand, when we basically know it's not coming back again, we come back to the 404. The content is gone. Yeah. Now, of course, we can make this a smart 404 where we can offer alternatives, still capture the lead, but the key thing is the content is gone. So it is a 404. Doing this can significantly improve user expectations and improve click-through rates because we're now managing the user expectations. Users now see the pages, thanks to a healthy crawl budget, see the pages that actually have products, come to those pages, and actually make conversions. So here we actually benefit in multiple ways. So just a couple of quick takeaways, and I'll open it up for some questions if you guys have them. Quick thing, make sure that you check your website for these things. Most SEO tools do not look for soft 404s. Yeah, you can find them, like for example, if we talk about Screaming Frog, they have a couple of negative language sentences that they scan for. If you look, for example, for Lumar, they have reports like that's called excessive canonicals or excessive redirects. Those two are basically hints of, hey, here there might be a soft 404 going on. Yeah. Other tools have other ways as potentially as well. These type of reports, that's what you need to be looking at: redirects, canonization, and negative language. And you can pretty much with most crawlers nowadays, you can also say, hey, search for this term. So look at your website, look at which negative language you're using on the website, and try to, like when you crawl, pick that up. Yeah, audit your website, check what's going on. Then decide what's going on here. Should it be a 404 or not? In most cases, it probably should be. So utilize it when you can and avoid the soft 404 or take them out, fix it when you have them. Because in the end, for Google, it's all about the trust signals. Trust of the server configuration. Is your server responding correctly and set up correctly, as well as the content quality. Yeah? And without that trust, you basically will not rank as well as pretty much anyone else you're competing with. If they have it better than you, it's that simple. I'm sorry. Bearer of bad news in that regard. But the good news is, of course, the 404 is our friend, yeah, from an SEO perspective. And yeah, that's basically it. If you want a copy of this slide deck, just contact me at fili.com or searchbros.com. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any. Thank you. I'll be also around if you otherwise have questions later. Yeah?
Is there a chance that the search engines kind of figure out the ad reviews language kind of matches their reviews and adapt to that, or do they want to see the positive language?
They scan for potential negative language. So if you give them negative language, they're more likely to pick it up as. But it also depends on the rest of the website. So if the rest of the website is very templated, if the whole page is very dynamic and less templated, and it's only a small subset of that, it's less likely to be picked up as a soft 404. But the more templated the website is, and think of the templates being the boilerplate, being the header, the sidebars, and the footer part, the part that is repetitive on every page. That's something that Google can detect very well. Why? Because they crawl the entire website. They can see what is coming back on every other page. Yeah. So also login pages, for example, where there's maybe a login form, but it basically says negative language above it, can be misinterpreted as a soft 404. They're trying to figure out, like, if there's almost no content, no really unique content, okay, and there's negative language, they're trying to figure out, is this actually a soft 404 or not? So because they want to crawl less then to preserve their resources. So be mindful. The negative language part is also something we don't talk much about in our industry, but we really should also be more positive in that way, because let's be honest, our users do not respond well to negative language when we're trying to sell them something. So the whole fact that we have negative language on our website is already not helping converting our users. Yeah. So from that perspective, just for that reason, that's your selling point, upwards if needed. But, you know, from a search engine perspective, they do look for this too. 60% of the web is duplicated. They're trying to reduce what they crawl of that. And if a lot of it is duplicated because of no results, or just basically because they think it might be soft 404s, you know, they want to not crawl that, or at least crawl that less. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Cool.
Like I said, I'll be around if you guys have any other questions, and if not, then I'll release you for lunch.